Hi, hello, and welcome. I get a lot of people asking me, how do I move from a state of being just in a surviving state or a survival mode to move into a thriving state? Or they may say, I'm so sick and tired of being stuck in survival. I'm stuck in a rut. I want to get on and live my life. How do I actually do this? In this video, I'm going to talk about what is survival? What for human beings are the thoughts, feelings, and actions and behaviors? And what does your brain look like when it's in a survival mode? And then I'm going to look at thriving, what this means in terms of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors for human beings. And what does your brain have to be like in order to be in a state where you can thrive? I'm also going to look at how you get your brain into a state where you can thrive and how you can keep it there. Okay, let's start off with survival. The brain is wired for survival. So that's its default state. So in the event of doing nothing, your brain is going to start activating all the systems that keep it alive and keep you in survival mode. And you want this because you're certainly not going to thrive if you're dead. So you want to be able to survive, and nature and biology has made it such that that is our default state. Now, when you are in survival mode, what does this mean? Okay, firstly, from the point of view of the brain, your brain stem, which deals with functions such as your breathing, your heart rate, your sleep-wake, being conscious, some reflex actions like swallowing, obviously that needs to be working well. And typically, when we look at survival, though, we are looking at what's called the limbic system, which is the part of the brain made up of a number of different organs, which is towards the bottom and center of what we call the brain, which is the gray matter, the cortex. Okay, the limbic system is very important in survival. The limbic system is involved with emotional processing, emotional memories, and triggering the fight or flight response. And in particular, when your eyes, when your ears, when your senses pick up a possible threat or danger to you, then the amygdala will trigger off the fight or flight response, which can be fight, flight. It can also be fawn or freeze. And this causes the brain or the body to release stress hormones. And you know what happens in this case. Energy and oxygen and glucose moves away from some of the internal systems like the reproductive system, the immune system, the digestive system, and it moves towards the heart and the lungs, and to your extremities like the legs and the arms, so that you can get ready to fight and to flee. Your focus narrows on the actual threat. So you're not that aware of anything else around you. It's just, let me focus on this threat so that I can actually get away from it. Also, typically what happens is part of the gray matter, the prefrontal cortex, and the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that is just behind your forehead. That tends to shut down a bit. And that is the part of the brain that deals with complex problem solving, that deals with creativity, that deals with decision making. So that shuts down somewhat when you're in survival state and you're just really in a fight or flight response. Now, fight or flight is good because even though we don't really live in the era of saber-toothed tigers and we don't have them wandering our streets, you may very well be crossing the road and have a motor vehicle speeding at you really fast. And then you do want your brain to go into survival mode because it's going to get you to run out of the way of that speeding car very fast. And if you are in a shopping center and somebody suddenly pulls out a gun, yes, once again, you want the survival brain to be, you're glad it's on default mode and you want it to start working so you can also get out of the way of danger. And the brain in survival mode is actually good because it keeps us alive, and even today it keeps us alive. What is a problem is that our brain is designed to be in survival mode for a short period of time. So only so long that you can get yourself out of quite a bad situation. And what has happened today is that a lot of our threats and dangers actually are not over quickly, but they persist for quite a long time. So you may, in fact, have a toxic boss at work, and your brain is going to perceive threat and danger literally every single day you go to work. Or you may have an abusive partner, in which case your brain is going to be in survival mode on a daily basis. And this is not good for your physical health, your mental health, and even for thriving in general. Because what happens when you stay in survival mode for a long time? Well, first of all, your brain is once again continuing to move resources, oxygen and glycogen and so on, away from certain of the internal systems like your immune system, like your digestive system, like the reproductive system. And so in the longer term, you're going to start having problems in these areas and your health is going to deteriorate. By getting you to focus only on the threat, it means that's all you can think about it. And if the threat is something like, oh, I'm going to lose my job, or with inflation, how on earth am I going to sit there and come out at the end of the month? You don't want to focus on the threat. You want to be able to focus quite broadly so that you can see opportunities and possibilities for solving the problem. So being stuck in survival mode is also not going to help you in that particular situation. In the long term, survival mode also gets us to replay our mistakes over and over again. Your brain goes, whoa, you nearly fell off the cliff and killed yourself when you stood on that corner. So to make sure that you don't do it again, it's going to replay the mistakes over and over again. It gets you to start thinking about worst case scenarios. It gets you to focus on what is familiar. When you are in survival mode, you don't want to go and try out new things and do new things. You focus on what is familiar, so you're going to stay. So you're going to stay in that horrible job. You're going to stay in that horrible relationship, because that's just naturally what your brain gets you to do when you are in a survival state. You lose energy, so you conserve energy. It takes a lot of energy to be in a fight or flight state. So you're going to feel quite exhausted and fatigued if you're in it for a long time. You're also not going to feel like being very proactive and going to find solutions, because that takes energy and you're using all your energy up just to stay in fight or flight. Okay, so in the long term, you don't actually want to be in survival mode. You want to get out of it. So let's look at the brain now in terms of thriving. In order to thrive, first of all, what does it mean to thrive? For most people, it means I'm happy, I'm successful, I'm getting on with my life, I'm able to deal with the problems that come along, I'm able to possibly even make my dreams come true, I'm able to forge the path ahead that I want to in terms of getting ahead. And for this, you need your whole brain to function. Okay. Brainstem, obviously, because if you're not alive and you're not conscious, well, you're not really going to thrive. You need to also have your limbic system and the part of the brain that is wired to survive and to keep you alive. You need it to be reasonably calm. Because if you are overstressed and over anxious all the time, you're going to quite easily go into a fight or flight state with any little thing that comes along. And when you're in, as we've seen, when you're in survival mode, it's very, very difficult to creatively problem solve, to think, to come up with new ideas, and to what some people call live your best life. Okay, now, so brainstem's functioning well, which means attention to your basic health. You know this, eat well, make sure your blood pressure is okay, see your doctor regularly, get checkups, sleep, hydrate, do exercise. The limbic system, make sure, and if you are somebody who's got a lot of stress and anxiety, then there's plenty of techniques on how to manage them so that you can keep your stress response low and you don't keep going into fight or flight the whole time. So you can do something. And if you want to be in a thriving state, then you do need to actually work on keeping your limbic system in quite a calm state. And then we get on to what often people see as the brain proper, which is the gray matter, which is the cortex. And as I said, if you want to thrive, it's really the prefrontal cortex, the part just behind the forehead, that is particularly important. The prefrontal cortex deals with your executive functions, which is your ability to make complex decisions, your ability to problem solve, your ability to think creatively, your ability to understand context, to understand long-term consequences, to understand social behavior, your own and others, and the consequences of that kind of social behavior. Now, a lot of people think, and I just want to talk about creativity, because a lot of people think that, creativity is only associated with the right brain or the right hemisphere. In actual fact, creativity is associated with the entire brain. You can't be creative unless your whole brain is working well. And there's even some recent research in the Journal of Neuroscience in 2023 and the National Institute for Mental Health in the US in 2024, indicating that the cerebellum, which is that small part of the brain at the bottom, near the back, is also quite important in creativity and in complex decision making. So you need your whole brain. So your brainstem's got to be fine, your basic health's got to be fine. You've got to manage your stress responses and you've got to manage your anxiety. And then we can start getting into focusing on how you can thrive. One of the most important things about the cortex, which is the most advanced part of the brain and it is the latest to develop, is something called a property, or the brain has the property of neuroplasticity, which means that consistently repeated thoughts, actions, and behaviors wire together to create new neural pathways. So a lot of what's going on in your cortex and your prefrontal cortex is based on your life experiences and what you've learned. If you have had a lot of situations in life where you've had to really think creatively, you've had a lot of challenges where you've really had difficult problems to solve, your brain is going to be better at it because it works on the principle of learning. As I said, consistently repeated thoughts, actions, and behaviors are wired together to create a neural pathway. The more you repeat them, the thicker the neural pathway, the stronger the neural pathway. And if you keep repeating them, the stronger the pathway becomes and the more it starts to become automatic. So it takes less effort and less energy to get it to be activated. So if you want to thrive in life, you need your cortex and the neocortex, and you need, in particular, the prefrontal cortex to be working well. And a lot of how well that works depends on how much you've used it. A lot of the brain works on the principle of use it or lose it. And there's quite a lot of research that has shown specifically this. If you don't use, if they map parts of your brain to certain activities and you no longer do those activities, the brain starts getting those cells to be utilized for something else that you do a lot of. So practice and learning is how you actually get the neocortex to work very well. You know this. You know this in terms of motor functions, because if you're going to kick a ball, you know that there's a series of neurons that are going to wire together that will then get those muscles to twitch and to enable you to kick the ball. And you know that if you do it over and over again, you're going to get better at it. Exactly the same principle applies in terms of how you think and in terms of other cognitive functions. If you want to be good at problem solving, then practice it. If you want to be creative, then you also want to practice it. So, in order to thrive, you need everything to work. You need to be basically healthy. You need to manage your stress and anxiety, and once off is not going to cut it, because remember, the default setting for the brain is survival, which is actually fight or flight. We live in a very complex world where there's lots of threats. Every single day there's threats. They might not be the immediate kinds of threats that result in you thinking, oh, I'm going to die, but things like wars, things like inflation, things like, oh, I'm never going to come out on my income, what I'm going to do about my money, toxic people, challenges around work, these things also trigger the fight or flight response. So you do want to actually be practicing stress management, and you do want to be managing your anxiety and keeping the levels low. And then you need to work the prefrontal cortex and the whole neocortex. You need to actually think and work and practice to develop your ability to solve problems, to think creatively, to look at other opportunities and other possibilities. Okay, so having said that, is it possible that your brain is always in a state of thriving? No, I don't think it is. Life is very complicated, and no matter who we are, there are new things that come along, there are new threats, there are new challenges. Something happens in the world. You can't really read the news or listen to the news without something coming along and probably triggering the fight or flight response in your brain. So no, you can't forever be in a state of thriving. What you don't want, though, is to be constantly in a state of survival, or be in a state of survival for a long term. So I hope some of what I've shared with you helps you to not stay there for a long time. If you're going to perceive a threat, you're going to have a fight and flight response, you want to try and get out of it quite quickly. And that means you need to start activating the systems that are going to get you to think broader, think creatively, problem solve, and look at a whole lot of other possibilities as well. From my side, I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care. Goodbye.